The Colosseum wasn't built for entertainment. You think they built it for the games. That is what they tell you. That is what the tour guides say, what the documentaries show, what the textbooks print. They show you the sand, the gates, the underground tunnels. They tell you about the lions and the gladiators and the cheering crowd. 50,000 people, 80,000. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Blood soaking into the arena floor. And you nod. You think you understand. But the Colosseum was not built for entertainment. You need to forget everything you think you know. Forget the movies. Forget the paintings. Forget the stories your grandfather told you when you were a child. We are going to start from the beginning. We are going to strip it down to the stone, and you are going to see it for what it really was. You see this stone? Travertine, quarried at Tivoli, 30 kilometers east of here. Each block weighs 50, 60 tons. Look at the edge. Look at the corner. Do you see the chisel marks? Do you see how perfectly it meets the next block? There are no clamps showing now. They pried them out centuries ago. But once, between every block, there were iron clamps set in lead. Tens of thousands of them. Men stood here with hammers and chisels and picks, and they dragged these stones from the quarry, across the mountains, down the Via Tiburtina, into the heart of Rome. Why? To watch men kill each other? No. Look at the wall. Really look at it. Do you see the pockmarks? Do you see where the clamps used to be? That is not damage from earthquakes. That is not time. That is men with crowbars, standing exactly where we are standing now, pulling the building apart. For 1,000 years, this building was a quarry. They took the marble for St. Peter's. They took the travertine for Palazzo Barberini. They took the columns, the capitals, the lintels. They burned the rest for lime. If you walk through Rome today, you are walking through the Colosseum. It is scattered across the city. It is in the churches, the palaces, the fountains. They did not destroy it because they hated it. They destroyed it because they needed it. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Let me ask you something. When you look at this building, what do you see? Most people see an amphitheatre. They see a place for spectacle. They see a stadium like the ones in their own cities, only older and more ruined. They think, the Romans liked blood sports. They think, the Romans were cruel. They think, thank God we are not like that anymore. But that is not what this is. This is not a stadium. This is a machine. A machine has a function. A machine transforms one thing into another. A machine takes input and produces output. You do not build a machine of this size, this complexity, this cost, because you want to give the people a nice afternoon out. What was the input? Money, labor, stone, grain, animals, men. What was the output? Power. Pure, distilled, unarguable power. You've heard the phrase. Panem et circenses. Bread and circuses. You think it means the Romans bribed the people with food and shows. You think it means the mob was easily distracted. You think it means they were simple, primitive, childlike in their appetite. You are wrong. Juvenal wrote that phrase. Juvenal was not celebrating. He was mourning. He was an old man, sitting in a dark room, writing satire because he was too angry to write anything else. He watched the Republic die. He watched the emperors take everything. He watched the people forget what they had lost. He wrote, the people who once gave commands, consulships, legions, everything, now holds itself back and anxiously hopes for just two things, bread and circuses. This is not a description of happiness. This is a description of defeat. The Colosseum was not built to make the people happy. It was built to make them forget they had ever been anything else. Do you know who Vespasian was? He was a general, a practical man, the son of a tax collector, not born to the purple, not like Nero, with his golden house and his Greek poetry and his delusions of artistic genius. Vespasian was old. He was balding. He had a sense of humor. When he was dying, he said, "Oh dear, I think I am becoming a god." He took the throne after a year of chaos. 4 emperors in 12 months. Galba, Otho, Vitellius. Assassinated, suicided, dragged through the streets. The empire was bleeding. The treasury was empty. The legions were fighting each other. And Nero's golden house sat in the center of Rome, taking up prime real estate, a monument to everything that had gone wrong. Vespasian could have torn it down. He could have built baths. He could have built a forum. He could have built temples to himself, like Nero did, like Domitian would do, like all the vain emperors who came before and after. Instead, he drained the lake. There was a lake in the grounds of Nero's palace, an artificial lake for Nero's artificial pleasures. Vespasian drained it. He filled it in. And on that spot, he began to build an amphitheatre. Why there? Symbolism. You understand symbolism. When you tear down the tyrant statue, you are making a statement. When you build a public building on the site of a private pleasure palace, you are making a statement. When you take Nero's colossal statue, the 100-foot bronze that gave this building its name, and you recarve its face into the sun god, you are making a statement. But Vespasian was not a sentimental man. He did not build with symbols. He built with stone and concrete and slave labor. He built because he needed to control a city that no longer trusted its rulers. He built because he needed to show the people that the new regime was different. He built because he needed to pay his debts, and he paid them with gold from Jerusalem. Do not look away. You have heard about the spoils of the temple, the 7-branched candlestick, the silver trumpets, the table of the showbread. You have seen the arch of Titus, the relief carving, the soldiers carrying the menorah through the streets of Rome. You have read the history, the siege, the famine, the burning of the sanctuary, the thousands of prisoners sold into slavery, but you have not connected it to this building. The Colosseum was built with Jewish gold. That is not poetry. That is not metaphor. That is accounting. When Vespasian needed money for his amphitheatre, he used the proceeds from the war. The inscription on the building, now lost but recorded in ancient sources, read, "The Emperor Vespasian ordered this new amphitheatre to be erected from his general share of the booty." General share, the portion reserved for the commander-in-chief, the spoils of the Temple of Jerusalem. So when you stand in this building, you are standing on the proceeds of massacre, and that is the point. The Colosseum is not about entertainment. It is not about sport. It is not about culture. It is about violence, and who controls it. Think about the location, not where it is, why it is there. Rome already had amphitheatres. There was one in the Campus Martius, temporary, wooden, built by Julius Caesar. There were others in the Forum Boarium, in the Circus Flaminius. The city did not need another venue, but those amphitheatres were on the edges of the city, peripheral, easy to ignore. Vespasian built his amphitheatre in the valley between the Esquiline, the Palatine, and the Caelian hills. He built it on the site of Nero's lake, yes, but he also built it at the crossroads of the city. He built it where everyone could see it. He built it where everyone had to pass it. This is not a venue. This is a fortress. Look at the facade. 4 stories. Arches on the bottom 3, alternating engaged columns on the 4th. Doric on the ground floor, Ionic on the 2nd, Corinthian on the 3rd, flat pilasters on the top. It is a theatre, yes, but it is also a wall. For 400 years, the Colosseum was the tallest building in Rome. Nothing else came close. Not the temples, not the basilicas, not the imperial palaces on the Palatine. When you approached the city from the south, this is what you saw. When you came down the Via Appia, past the tombs and the aqueducts, this is what dominated the skyline. It was not an invitation. It was a warning. You are asking about the Hypogeum. Everyone asks about the Hypogeum. You have seen the photographs, the underground passages, the tunnels, the chambers. You've heard about the elevators, the trapdoors, the cages. You imagine slaves and stagehands and wild animals, all hidden beneath the arena floor, waiting to emerge and astonish the crowd. That is what the Hypogeum became. But that is not what it was originally. The original Colosseum did not have a Hypogeum. It had an arena floor, and beneath that floor, nothing. Open space, empty ground. Domitian built the Hypogeum. Domitian, Vespasian's younger son, the third of the Flavian emperors. Domitian the paranoid. Domitian the autocrat. Domitian who insisted on being called Dominus et Deus, Lord and God, while he sat in his palace on the Palatine, surrounded by spies and informers. Domitian understood something his father and brother had not. An arena without secrets is just a place. An arena with secrets is a theatre of power. The Hypogeum is a labyrinth. 2 main corridors running the length of the arena. Cross corridors perpendicular, creating a grid of chambers and passageways. Ramps, elevators, counterweights, trapdoors. Before Domitian, animals and gladiators entered through the gates at the ends of the arena. You could see them coming. You could prepare yourself. There was anticipation, yes, but there was also predictability. After Domitian, they rose up through the floor. Imagine it. You are sitting in the stands. The arena is empty, sand smooth and level. Nothing happening. The crowd is restless, murmuring, shifting in their seats. Then the floor opens. A lion erupts from below, roaring, disoriented, furious. Where did it come from? Not from outside, not from a gate, from beneath, from the earth itself. The emperor did not just sponsor the games. The emperor controlled the ground beneath your feet. You are standing on the arena floor. No, you are not. Not really. The original arena floor is gone. This is a modern reconstruction, a wooden platform built over the excavated Hypogeum. You are standing where tourists stand, not where gladiators fought. But you can see the Hypogeum below you. You can see the brick walls, the passageways, the chambers. You can see the grooves worn into the stone by centuries of ropes and pulleys. You can see the cages, small rooms really, not much bigger than a closet. This is where they kept the animals before a show. Lions, bears, leopards, sometimes elephants, rhinoceroses, giraffes, imported from Africa, from Asia, from the edges of the empire, shipped across the Mediterranean, marched through the streets of Rome, lowered into these cells. How long did they wait? Hours, probably. Maybe a day, in the dark, in the noise. The crowd above them, roaring, the smell of blood seeping through the sand. the vibration of thousands of feet stomping in unison. And then the trapdoor opens, and the elevator lifts them into the light. They never had a chance. That was the point. You are asking about the velarium, the awning, the enormous canvas roof that shaded the spectators from the sun. It was a miracle of engineering, a separate machine, entirely independent of the building itself, a system of masts and ropes and pulleys, operated by sailors from the Roman navy, men who understood wind and canvas and the mathematics of tension. There are still holes in the top of the facade where the masts were inserted. You can see them if you look up. Stone brackets projecting outward with circular sockets drilled into the stone. The velarium did not cover the entire arena. It could not. The span was too great. Instead, it created a ring of shade around the edges, leaving the center open to the sun. The emperor and the Vestal virgins sat in the shade. The senators sat in the shade. The equestrians sat in partial shade, depending on the angle of the sun. The poor sat in the sun. Everything was hierarchy. Everything was visible. The building did not just house the social order. It produced it. You did not bring your status to the Colosseum. You received your status from the Colosseum. Look at the seating. The lowest level, the podium, was reserved for the emperor, the vestals, and the senators. Marble seats, wide and comfortable. Cushions, probably. Attendants to bring refreshments. Above that, the Maenianum Primum for the equestrian order. The businessmen, the tax collectors, the provincial administrators. Good seats, but not the best. Close enough to see, far enough to know their place. Above that, the Maenianum Secundum, divided into two sections. The lower section for wealthy citizens, the upper section for the poor. And at the very top, the Maenianum Summum, a gallery standing room only for women, slaves, and foreigners. The worst view, the greatest distance, the least comfort. 80 entrances, 76 numbered gates for the general public, plus 4 grand entrances for the elite. The numbering system was not arbitrary. It was your ticket. You entered through gate 17. You climbed stairwell 17. You sat in section 17. No confusion. No mixing of classes. No opportunity for the poor to slip into the seats of the rich. The building sorted you. The building told you who you were. You have heard about the sea battles. Naumachia, mock naval engagement, fought in flooded arenas. Cassius Dio says the Colosseum was inaugurated with one. Titus filled the arena with water, brought in ships, reenacted a battle between Corcyraeans and Corinthians, or maybe Athenians and Syracusans. The sources are unclear. Modern scholars doubt it. Not the sea battles themselves. Those certainly happened. Augustus held one across the Tiber, in a basin specially excavated for the purpose. Claudius held one on the Fucine Lake, complete with armed criminals on ships and praetorians on rafts. Nero held one in his wooden amphitheatre, with seawater and marine monsters. But the Colosseum, the Hypogeum, is the problem. Domitian's labyrinth, the tunnels and chambers and elevators. All of it sits directly beneath the arena floor. You cannot flood the arena without flooding the Hypogeum. You cannot have a sea battle without drowning your stagehands. Maybe the earliest spectacles, before Domitian built his underground complex, included naval displays. Maybe Titus flooded the arena, brought in flat-bottom boats, staged something impressive enough for Dio to record it a century later. Maybe. Or maybe Dio was mistaken. Maybe he conflated the Colosseum with other venues. Maybe he heard a story and repeated it without verification. It does not matter. The idea of the sea battle is more important than its reality. The Romans wanted to believe their amphitheatre could hold an ocean. They wanted to believe their engineers could transform sand into water, arena into strait, slaughter into spectacle. They wanted to believe the emperor commanded not just men and animals, but the elements themselves. Terraformers, gods. You are looking at the arches, 76 on the ground floor originally, each one a perfect semicircle, springing from travertine piers. Above them, a second story of identical arches. Above that, a third. And then the attic, the solid wall, the brackets for the velarium. The arches are not just structural, they are rhetorical. Each arch frames a space. Each space contains a statue. In the original building, the ground floor arches held gilded bronze statues of gods and heroes. Mars, Venus, Hercules, Aeneas, Romulus, Julius Caesar, the divine ancestors of the Roman people, looking down on the crowd that bore their name. Statues are gone now, melted down, looted, destroyed. Only the niches remain, empty frames, but you can still see what they were meant to do. They were meant to remind you, you are not just watching a show, you are participating in the eternal life of Rome. The gods are watching, the heroes are watching, the ancestors are watching, and they approve. This is not entertainment, this is liturgy. Let me tell you about the Christians. You have heard the stories. The martyrs thrown to the lions. The brave believers singing hymns as the beasts tear them apart. The blood of the saints soaking into the sand, fertilizing the church that would one day conquer the empire. It is a powerful story. It is mostly untrue. Yes, Christians were executed in Rome. Yes, some of those executions probably took place in amphitheatres, but the Colosseum was not a dedicated persecution machine. It was not the primary site of Christian martyrdom. The evidence is thin, late, and heavily mythologized. The Church, however, needed martyrs. In the 18th century, Pope Benedict XIV declared the Colosseum a sacred site. He installed the Stations of the Cross around the arena. He consecrated the ground. He announced that countless Christians had died here, witnessing to the faith. Why? Because he needed to stop the looting. For 1,000 years, the Colosseum had been a quarry. Popes, cardinals, aristocrats. All of them had taken stone from the Flavian Amphitheatre to build their own palaces and churches. Benedict XIV wanted it to stop. He could not post guards at every arch. He could not afford to buy back the land. He could not physically prevent men with crowbars from taking what they wanted. But he could make it holy, and holy things are not quarried for building materials. So he consecrated the building. He erected crosses. He commemorated the martyrs. He transformed a monument to imperial power into a monument to Christian suffering. It worked. The looting stopped, and a new myth was born. You are standing in the Hypogeum now. It is dark down here. Even with the electric lights, even with the walkways and the handrails, even with the other tourists shuffling past you, it is dark. The brick walls are 2,000 years old. The floor is original Roman concrete. The air is cold and still. This is the machine room. Look at the channels cut into the stone. Look at the worn grooves, the polished edges. Ropes ran here. Thousands of ropes, over hundreds of years, pulled by teams of slaves and stagehands, lifting cages, opening trapdoors, raising scenery. There were 32 trapdoors in the arena floor, 32 places where the earth could open and deliver death. There were elevators. Not electric, of course. Human-powered, counterweights and pulleys, a cage in the hypogeum, a platform in the arena, and men hauling on ropes to raise it. 8 men, maybe 10. Strong men. Men who did this all day, every day, during the games. How many animals died here? We do not know. The ancient sources give numbers, but they are rhetorical, not statistical. Dio says 9,000 animals were killed during the inaugural games. Other sources say 11,000. Later emperors boasted of even greater slaughter. Let us accept the numbers, not as facts, but as claims. What did it mean to claim you had killed 9,000 animals? It meant you had emptied the provinces. It meant you had commandeered every ship in the Mediterranean. It meant you had spent more money on a single festival than most cities spent in a decade. It meant you could do anything. The gladiators. Everyone asks about the gladiators. You want to know who they were. You want to know where they came from. You want to know if they really fought to the death, or if it was more like professional wrestling, choreographed and scripted. The answer is complicated. Most gladiators were slaves, prisoners of war, condemned criminals, men who had been sold to the dynasty, the gladiator trainers, and were now legally classified as things, not persons. They had no rights. They had no autonomy. They had no future. But some were volunteers, free men, citizens, who signed contracts with the training schools and swore oaths to endure being burned, bound, beaten, and killed by the sword. Why would anyone do that? Money, fame, the chance to escape poverty. The same reasons men become boxers and mixed martial artists today. The difference is the death rate. We do not know exactly how many gladiators died in the arena. The evidence is fragmentary, contradictory, hard to interpret. Gravestones record some who fought dozens of times and died of old age. Literary sources describe others who were killed in their first bout. The best estimate is something like 1 in 5 or 1 in 10 fights ended in death. Not every match, not every day, but often enough that gladiators knew when they walked into the arena, they might not walk out, and the crowd knew it too. That was the attraction, not the skill, not the athleticism, not the courage, the death. You are looking at the name, Colosseum. You've heard it comes from the Colossus of Nero, the giant bronze statue that once stood nearby. That is true, but the word has another meaning, older than the building itself. Kolossos, in Greek, a statue, a giant, something too large to be comprehended. The Romans called this building the Flavian Amphitheatre for centuries. That was its official name. That is what appears on inscriptions and in legal documents. The Colosseum was a nickname, a vulgarism, a thing the common people said because they could not pronounce the proper term. But the nickname won, because the building is a colossus. It is too large to be comprehended. You cannot take it in all at once. You have to walk around it, circle it, approach it from different angles. And even then, you only see fragments. A wall, an arch, a tunnel, a cage. We call it the Colosseum because we cannot name it. We do not know what it is. Let us talk about the money. The Colosseum cost a fortune to build. How much? We do not know exactly. The ancient sources do not give a figure, and modern estimates are wildly speculative. But we can make some inferences. Consider the labor. The building contains approximately 100,000 cubic meters of travertine stone. Each cubic meter weighs about 2.5 tons. That is 250,000 tons of stone, quarried at Tivoli, transported 30 kilometers to Rome, lifted into place. How many man-hours to cut a ton of travertine? How many to load it onto a cart? How many to move it down the Via Tiburtina? How many to lift it onto scaffolding and set it in place? We do not know. But we know it was many. Then add the concrete. Roman concrete, made from lime and volcanic ash, set in wooden forms. The foundations are concrete. The upper walls are concrete. The vaults, the corridors, the staircases, all concrete. Then add the brick. Millions of bricks, fired in kilns, laid in mortar. The hypogeum is brick. The interior walls are brick. The facing on the concrete is brick. Then add the marble, the seats, the columns, the statues, the inscriptions. Marble from Carrara, from Greece, from North Africa. Quarried, shipped, carved, installed. Then add the bronze, the clamps that held the travertine together, the railings that separated the seating sections, the decorations on the facade, all bronze, all valuable. Then add the labor of the architects, the engineers, the surveyors, the foremen, the men who drew the plans, calculated the stresses, supervised the construction. Then add the labor of the slaves, the thousands of slaves captured in the Jewish war, shipped to Rome, set to work hauling stone and mixing concrete. Their labor was free, or rather, it was already paid for in the cost of the war that captured them. And then add the inauguration, 100 days of games, thousands of animals shipped from 3 continents, hundreds of gladiators trained and equipped, naval battles, animal hunts, executions, dramas, food for the crowd, wine, gifts, all of it paid for by Titus, or by his father's spoils, or by the imperial treasury. How much? More than we can calculate. Why did they spend so much? You are asking the wrong question. The question is not why. The question is how. How did Vespasian persuade the Roman people to accept a new dynasty after a year of civil war? How did he stabilize an empire that had nearly torn itself apart? How did he take the throne from a man who had been dragged through the streets and thrown into the Tiber, and make himself its legitimate occupant? He built a building, not any building. A building so large, so expensive, so impossible that no one could ignore it. A building that announced in stone and concrete and bronze, we are here, we are staying, we are in control. The Colosseum is not a gift. It is a proof. You are walking up the ramp to the upper levels. The stairs are steep. The passages are narrow. The stone is worn smooth by 2,000 years of feet. You pass through a corridor that was once crowded with Roman citizens, men in togas and women in stolas, children holding their parents' hands, slaves carrying cushions and refreshments. Where were they going? To their seats, to their assigned places in the great hierarchy of the Roman people, to the section reserved for their class, their profession, their gender. The building sorted them. The building told them who they were. At the very top, the women sat. Not Roman matrons of good family. They sat lower down with their husbands. These were the other women. Foreigners, freed women, the poor. They sat in the wooden gallery under the blazing sun, with the worst view of the arena. They came anyway. Why? Because the Colosseum was Rome. If you were not in the Colosseum, you were nowhere. You have heard about the animal hunts. Venationes. They were more popular than the gladiators in some periods. The Romans never tired of watching men kill beasts, or beasts kill men, or beasts kill each other. Every animal in the known world passed through this arena. Lions from Mesopotamia, tigers from Hyrcania, leopards from Syria, bears from Caledonia, elephants from North Africa, rhinoceroses from Ethiopia, hippos from the Nile, crocodiles from the Seine, giraffes, ostriches, zebras, aurochs, hyenas. The Romans did not know what some of these animals were. They had no names for them. They described them as woolly cattle or Ethiopian sheep or Indian oxen. They did not understand their habitats, their diets, their behaviors. They only understood that they were strange, and that strangeness was valuable. To capture an elephant, ship it across the Mediterranean, march it through the streets of Rome, and kill it in the arena. That was power. To do it with 100 elephants, that was more power. To do it with 1,000, that was empire. Do you know what happened to the animals? They died. Not just in the arena. On the ships, in the cages, on the long marches from the coast to the city. Roman logistics were good, but they were not that good. For every animal that entered the Colosseum, 3 or 4 died along the way. We do not know the numbers. We know the North African elephant was hunted to extinction. We know the Mesopotamian lion disappeared from its historic range. We know the European bear retreated into the deepest forests and never returned. The Colosseum ate them. Look at the north wall. Do you see the cracks? The displacement? The way the upper stories lean slightly inward, as if the building is collapsing in on itself. Earthquake. A major tremor, centered somewhere in the Apennines. The south side of the Colosseum held. The north side did not. A section of the outer wall fell away, collapsing into a heap of rubble at the base of the building. That rubble was the first to be quarried. For centuries, the Colosseum stood intact. It survived the fall of Rome, the Gothic Wars, the plague, the famine. It survived the transformation of the Forum into a cow pasture and the Palatine into a vineyard. It survived because it was too large to be useful. But after the earthquake, it was broken. Broken things can be used. They took the fallen stone first. Then they began to pry loose the standing stone. They pulled out the bronze clamps and melted them down. They stripped the marble revetment and burned it for lime. They removed the columns, the capitals, the lintels, and carted them away to build churches and palaces. They did not stop for 600 years. You are looking at the cross. It stands at the east end of the arena, mounted on a pedestal, visible from every level of the seating. At Easter, the Pope leads a torchlit procession around it. Thousands of pilgrims come to watch. The cross was not always here. Benedict XIV installed it in the 18th century as part of his campaign to sanctify the building. He also erected stations of the cross around the perimeter of the arena. He declared the Colosseum a memorial to the Christian martyrs. Was he right? We do not know. We know Christians were executed in Rome. We know some of those executions took place in amphitheatres. We know the Colosseum was the largest and most visible amphitheatre in the city. But we have no contemporary evidence of Christian martyrs dying here. The early Christian martyrologies are vague about locations. They mention amphitheatres. But which amphitheatre? There were several in Rome. There were dozens more in Italy. A martyr who died in Puteoli or Capua or Carthage could easily be relocated to the Colosseum by later tradition. It does not matter. The cross is here now. The pilgrims come. The Pope leads the procession. The building has been consecrated, and consecration cannot be undone. The Colosseum has outlived its builders. It has outlived the empire that created it. Now it serves a different master. You have heard about the restoration, the Hypogeum project. $30 million, funded by an Italian luxury goods company. 2 years of work by 80 archaeologists, architects, and engineers. New walkways, new lighting, new interpretive signage. They reopened it in 2021. Now tourists can walk where the animals once waited. They can stand in the cages, touch the brick walls, peer up through the trapdoors at the reconstructed arena floor. They can imagine the roar of the crowd, the smell of blood, the terror of the beasts. Is that education? Or is it entertainment? The Colosseum was not built for entertainment. But it has become entertainment anyway. We come here to be thrilled, to be horrified, to be impressed. We take photographs. We buy souvenirs. We post on social media. We are the crowd now, and the building still performs its ancient function. It makes us forget. Let me tell you about the inscriptions. There are almost none left on the building itself. The marble cladding is gone, the bronze letters melted down, the plaques pried off and repurposed. But we know what some of them said, because they were copied by medieval pilgrims and Renaissance antiquarians. One inscription recorded the restoration work of Theodosius II in the 5th century. Another commemorated repairs after the fire of 217. Another listed the animals killed during the inaugural games. And there was the original inscription from Vespasian himself. The Emperor Vespasian ordered this new amphitheatre to be erected from his general's share of the booty. No mention of entertainment, no mention of the Roman people, no mention of gladiators, or hunts, or spectacles, just the spoils of war, transformed into stone. You're walking out through the entrance. Not one of the 76 numbered gates. Those are blocked now, or converted into exhibition spaces, or simply walled up. You are leaving through the modern exit, past the gift shop and the ticket office, and the queue of tourists waiting to get in. You have been inside for hours. What have you seen? You have seen stone and concrete and brick. You have seen arches and corridors and staircases. You have seen the Hypogeum, the arena floor, the seating tiers. You have seen the cross and the stations of the Passion. You have seen the pockmarks where the bronze clamps were pried out and the marble cladding was stripped away. But you have not seen the Colosseum. The Colosseum is not a building. The Colosseum is an idea. It is the idea that power can be made visible, that violence can be transformed into spectacle, that a crowd of strangers can be united into a single entity, focused on a single point, feeling a single emotion. It is the idea that a man can stand at the center of that entity and say, I did this. I brought you here. I gave you this. I am the Emperor. You are standing outside now, looking back at the facade. The sun is low. The shadows are long. The travertine glows golden in the evening light. The arches cast overlapping curves of darkness across the ground. It is beautiful. That is the problem. We see beauty, and we stop asking questions. We see age, and we mistake it for wisdom. We see grandeur, and we assume it is good. The Colosseum is beautiful. It is ancient. It is grand. It is also a monument to mass slaughter, built with the spoils of genocide, maintained for centuries as a tool of political control. Both things are true. You cannot separate them. Do you understand now? The Colosseum was not built for entertainment. It was built for war, not war against external enemies. Though the animals and gladiators were often prisoners of war, and their deaths commemorated imperial victories. Not war against internal rebels. Though condemned criminals and political dissidents were executed here, their suffering a warning to others who might challenge the regime. War against the Roman people themselves, a war of pacification, a war of distraction, a war of forgetting. The Romans had conquered the world. They had no one left to fight. So they turned their violence inward, against each other, and called it sport. The Colosseum was the weapon, and the people, the 50,000, the 80,000, the 100,000 who packed these seats for 400 years. They were not the beneficiaries. They were the target. You are asking about the modern parallels. You have seen the stadiums, the arenas, the vast, expensive, technologically sophisticated venues that cities build to host spectacles. You have heard the arguments: economic development, civic pride, community gathering spaces. You have seen the crowds, the merchandise, the celebrities, the nationalism. You have seen the bread and circuses. It is not the same, you say. We do not kill people for entertainment. No, we do other things. We spend billions on buildings while schools crumble. We celebrate athletes while teachers strike. We fill stadiums on Sunday and empty voting booths on Tuesday. We watch the spectacle and we forget. The names change. The technology advances. The underlying structure remains. Power, control, distraction. The Colosseum was not built for entertainment. Neither are we. Let me tell you about the fire of 217. Lightning strike. The wooden upper gallery caught fire, and the flames spread to the velarium, and the velarium collapsed onto the seating below. The building burned for days. Cassius Dio, writing a few years later, says the damage was extensive. The entire interior was gutted. Only the outer wall and the arcades survived. They rebuilt it. Of course they rebuilt it. The Colosseum was too important to abandon. Elagabalus, Alexander Severus, Gordian III, each contributed to the restoration. New seating, new decorations, new machinery. By the middle of the 3rd century, the building was functioning again. Why go to all that trouble? Because the Colosseum was not just a building. It was the visible embodiment of the emperor's power. To let it lie in ruins would be to admit that the empire was failing. So they rebuilt it. They always rebuilt it. You are looking at the pockmarks again. Thousands of small holes scattered across the travertine facade. Some are clustered near the ground, where the stone was easiest to reach. Others are high up, near the attic, where men must have hung from ropes to pry out the lamps. Who were they? Medieval Romans. People whose names we will never know, whose faces we will never see, whose lives we can barely imagine. They came to the Colosseum with crowbars and hammers and chisels, and they took what they needed. They were not vandals. They were not enemies of the empire. They were just people trying to survive. The empire that built the Colosseum was gone. The emperors who inaugurated it were dust. The gods who watched from the arches were forgotten. Only the building remained, massive and silent and useless. So they made it useful. They turned stone into houses. They turned marble into lime. They turned bronze into tools and weapons and coins. They did not destroy the Colosseum. They recycled it. You are asking about the legacy. What does the Colosseum mean today? It means different things to different people. To the Italian state, it is a tourist attraction. 7 million visitors a year. Hundreds of millions of euros in revenue. A brand as recognizable as the Mona Lisa or the Eiffel Tower. To the Catholic Church, it is a sacred site. The cross, the stations, the Easter procession. A reminder of the martyrs who died for the faith. To the archaeologist, it is a research site. Layers of history, from Vespasian to Theodosius, to Benedict XIV. An archive in stone, waiting to be read. To the tourists, it is a backdrop. A place to take photographs. A place to check off a list. A place to say, I was here. And to us, it is a question. What do we do with the monuments of tyrants? Do we tear them down? Do we leave them standing? Do we reinterpret them, repurpose them, consecrate them to new gods? We do not know. We are still asking. The Colosseum was not built for entertainment. It was built for power. But power does not last. Vespasian died in 79, before his amphitheatre was even finished. Titus died 2 years later, after inaugurating the building with 100 days of games. Domitian, who built the Hypogeum, was assassinated in 96, his name erased from inscriptions, his memory condemned. The Flavians are gone. The empire is gone. The world they ruled, the world of senators and slaves, of triumphs and persecutions, of bread and circuses. That world is gone. Only the building remains. And the building is not what it was. It is broken. It is looted. It is restored and reinterpreted and repurposed. It is a quarry and a fortress and a shrine and a tourist attraction. It is everything its builders never intended it to be. It is alive, because buildings outlive their builders, because stone outlasts empire, because the questions we ask about the Colosseum, about power, about violence, about spectacle, about forgetting, are still the questions we ask about ourselves. You are standing at the exit. The light is fading. The last tourists are trickling out. The vendors are packing up their souvenirs. Their plastic gladiators and miniature colosseums and books of photographs. You have been here all day. You have walked the passages. You have touched the stone. You have read the inscriptions and studied the diagrams and listened to the guides. You think you understand now, but you do not. No one understands. Not completely. Not finally. The Colosseum is too old, too large, too complex. It has meant too many things to too many people. It has been used for too many purposes. The only thing we know for certain is this. It was not built for entertainment. Everything else is interpretation. Let me tell you one more story. In the 8th century, a pilgrim came to Rome from Anglo-Saxon England. He was not a king or a bishop or a nobleman. He was just a man with a staff and a satchel and a desire to see the holy places. He stood in front of the Colosseum and wondered at its size. He had never seen anything like it. The buildings of his homeland were wood and thatch, low and dark and temporary. This was stone and marble and bronze, massive and permanent and incomprehensible. He did not know what it was. He did not know it had been built for games and spectacles and executions. He did not know the names of the Flavians, or the details of the Jewish wall, or the mechanics of the Hypogeum. He knew only that it was ancient, and that it was Roman. And he knew a prophecy. Quandiu stat Colosseus, stat et Roma. Quando cadet Colosseus, cadet et Roma. Quando cadet Roma, cadet et mundus. As long as the Colossus stand, so shall Rome. When the Colossus falls, Rome shall fall. When Rome falls, so falls the world. The pilgrim wrote the prophecy down. He attributed it to the venerable Bede, though Bede never wrote it. He passed it on to other pilgrims, who passed it on to scribes, who passed it on to historians. And centuries later, people began to misread it. They thought Colosseus meant Colosseum, not Colossus. They thought the building itself was the symbol of Rome's eternity. They thought the prophecy promised that as long as the Colosseum stood, the world would stand. They were wrong, but they were also right, because the Colossus is gone. Nero's bronze giant, the statue that gave this building its name, that is gone, melted down probably, recast into bells or cannons or coins. Only the base remains, a few blocks of travertine between the Colosseum and the Temple of Venus and Roma. But the Colosseum still stands, and Rome still stands, and the world still stands. The prophecy failed, or maybe it succeeded, and we just misunderstood. You are looking at the base of the Colossus. It is not much to see. A concrete foundation, a few marble fragments, a plaque explaining what once stood here. Tourists walk past it without stopping. They do not know what it is. They do not know it gave the building its name. Nero erected this statue in his own image after the Great Fire of 64. He placed it in the vestibule of his golden house, 100 feet tall, gilded bronze, the largest statue ever made in Rome. After Nero died, the Flavians recarved the face. They added a solar crown. They renamed it Sol, the sun god. They moved it to make room for their amphitheatre, but they did not destroy it. Even the Flavians, for all their hatred of Nero, recognized the power of the Colossus. It was too large to ignore, too famous to discard, too valuable to destroy, so they kept it, and it stood here, beside the amphitheatre, for another 400 years. It watched the games. It watched the crowds. It watched the empire decline and fall, and then it fell. No one knows exactly when or how. Probably it was toppled by an earthquake. Probably its bronze was stripped and melted down. Probably its fragments were scattered across the city, incorporated into walls and foundations and pavements. The Colossus is gone, but the Colosseum remembers. You have walked the full circuit. You have seen the facade and the hypogeum and the arena floor. You have studied the arches and the seating and the Valerian brackets. You have traced the pockmarks with your fingers and read the inscriptions on the walls. You have spent more than 20,000 words on this building, and you are no closer to understanding it. That is the nature of the Colosseum. It resists understanding. It resists interpretation. It resists the neat categories and tidy narratives we try to impose upon it. It is too old, too damaged, too altered. Too many hands have touched it. Too many meanings have been inscribed upon it. The only honest response is silence. But we are not capable of silence. We are human. We tell stories. We make meaning. We take the raw material of the past and shape it into narratives that comfort and instruct and inspire. So we will go on telling stories about the Colosseum. We will call it a monument to Roman engineering. We will call it a symbol of imperial power. We will call it a shrine to Christian martyrs. We will call it a wonder of the world. We will call it anything except what it was, a machine for forgetting, and it will outlast all our stories. The Colosseum was not built for entertainment. It was built to make the people of Rome forget they had ever been free. And it worked. For 400 years, the people of Rome came to this building and watched men and animals die. They cheered and jeered and wept and laughed. They ate bread and watched circuses. They forgot the Republic. They forgot the Senate. They forgot the laws and liberties their ancestors had died to defend. They forgot. And when the game stopped, when the empire fell, when the building was abandoned and looted and transformed into a quarry and a fortress and a shrine, no one remembered what had been lost. No one remembered they had once been free. No one remembered the Colosseum had been built to make them forget. That is the true horror of this building. Not the death, the forgetting. You are leaving now. The sun has set. The sky is dark. The floodlights have come on, illuminating the Colosseum from below, casting dramatic shadows across the facade. It looks beautiful. It always looks beautiful. You'll go back to your hotel, your home, your life. You will look at the photographs on your phone. You will tell your friends and family about your visit. You will say it was amazing. You will say it was incredible. You will say it was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. You will not say what you have learned here. You will not say the Colosseum was built with the spoils of genocide. You will not say it was designed to pacify and control the Roman people. You will not say it is a machine for forgetting, because those are not the things tourists say. Tourists say, it was so big, it was so old, it was so beautiful. They do not say, it was so terrible, but you know now, and knowing changes nothing. One more thing, the sand. You have heard that the arena floor was covered with sand, and that the Latin word for sand is arena, which is where we get the word arena. You have heard that the sand absorbed the blood of the dying, and that workers raked it smooth between events, and that the floor of the Colosseum was literally a sea of blood and sand. All of this is true. But there is something else. The sand was not just practical. It was not just absorbent. It was not just a convenient surface for fighting and dying. It was symbolic. The Romans believed that the earth was the source of life and death. They believed that blood spilled on the ground nourished the spirits of the dead. They believed that the arena was a liminal space, a boundary between the world of the living and the world of the ancestors. When a gladiator died, his blood soaked into the sand. When the sand was raked, the blood was mixed with the earth. When the earth was removed, it was taken to consecrated ground and buried. The Colosseum was not just a place of death, it was a place of sacrifice. And the emperor was the high priest. You are standing in the center of the arena. Not the real arena. The real arena is gone. You are standing on the modern reconstruction, a wooden platform built over the hypogeum. Beneath your feet, the cages and corridors and elevators. Above your head, the open sky. Close your eyes. Can you hear them? 50,000 people, 80,000, roaring, stomping, chanting, the clang of swords on shields, the growl of lions, the screams of the dying. Can you feel the sand beneath your feet? Can you smell the blood? This is what the Colosseum was built for. Not entertainment. This. You have read more than 20,000 words about the Colosseum. You have learned about its construction and its inauguration, its renovations and its decay. You have learned about the animals and the gladiators and the crowds. You have learned about the hypogeum and the velarium and the statues in the arches. You have learned that it was not built for entertainment. What will you do with this knowledge? You will probably forget it. Not all at once. Not completely. But gradually, over time, the details will fade. The dates will blur. The names will slip away. You will remember that you read something about the Colosseum, something important, but you will not remember what it was. And that is okay. Forgetting is not failure. Forgetting is human. We cannot carry the weight of all the world's suffering. We cannot hold every atrocity in our memory. We must forget some things in order to remember others. But do not forget this. The Colosseum was not built for entertainment. It was built for power. And power always leaves its mark. The Colosseum is empty now. The tourists have gone. The vendors have packed up. The guards have locked the gates. Only the floodlights remain, casting their pale glow across the ancient stone. The building stands alone. It has stood alone for most of its life. 400 years of games, 1600 years of silence. The games were the exception, not the rule. The silence is the norm, but the silence is not empty. It is full of echoes. Echoes of the crowds, the animals, the dying. Echoes of the builders and the looters and the pilgrims. Echoes of all the men and women who have passed through these arches and left some small piece of themselves behind. The building remembers, even when we forget. You are asking one final question. Why did you tell me all this? Why did you spend 20,000 words explaining something I could have learned from a guidebook or a documentary or a Wikipedia article? Because a guidebook tells you what the Colosseum is. A documentary tells you what the Colosseum was. A Wikipedia article tells you what the Colosseum has been. But none of them tell you what the Colosseum does. And the Colosseum still does what it was built to do. It makes you forget. You came here expecting a story about entertainment. You expected gladiators and lions and thumbs down. You expected blood and sand and spectacle. I gave you something else. I gave you power, control, forgetting. I gave you the truth. And now you will leave this building, this city, this country. You will return to your life. You will forget most of what you read here, but not all of it. Somewhere, in the back of your mind, a small voice will whisper, the Colosseum was not built for entertainment, and you will know it is true. The night is deep. The stars are out. The Colosseum stands against the darkness, massive and silent and eternal. It has stood here for 2,000 years. It will stand here for 2,000 more. Long after we are gone, long after our cities have crumbled, and our languages have died, and our names have been forgotten, this building will remain, and people will come from across the world to see it. They will stand where you are standing now. They will look up at the arches and the columns and the pockmarked stone. They will ask the same questions you asked, and they will receive the same answer. The Colosseum was not built for entertainment. It was built for Rome. And Rome is eternal. Quam diu stat Colosseus, stat et Roma. Quando cadet Colosseus, cadet et Roma. Quando cadet Roma, cadet et mundus. As long as the Colossus stands, so shall Rome. When the Colossus falls, Rome shall fall. When Rome falls, so falls the world. The Colossus fell long ago, but Rome still stands, and the Colosseum still stands, and the world still stands. The prophecy was wrong, or maybe it was right, and we are the ones who do not understand. Maybe the Colossus was never the statue. Maybe the Colossus was the building. Maybe the Colossus is still standing, and maybe, as long as it stands, the world will stand with it. You are gone now. The building is empty. The floodlights have been turned off, one by one, leaving only the ambient glow of the city. Rome is awake around the Colosseum, millions of people living their lives in the shadow of the ancient stone. They do not think about it. Why would they? It is just a building. It has always been there. It will always be there. It is as natural as the hills, as permanent as the sky. But it is not natural. It is made, and everything made can be unmade. The Colosseum will fall someday. Not tomorrow, not next year, not even next century. But someday, the stone will crumble, the concrete will crack, the arches will collapse, and when it falls, Rome will fall with it. Not the city. The city will survive, as it has survived for 3,000 years. The idea of Rome will survive, as it has survived for 2 millennia. The empire, the church, the republic, all of it will survive. But the Colosseum will not, and something will end. What exactly? I do not know. Perhaps the memory of what we were. Perhaps the hope of what we might become. Perhaps nothing at all. The Colosseum was not built for entertainment. It was built for eternity. And eternity is a long time to wait. But the building is patient. It has waited before. It waited for Vespasian to drain the lake and lay the foundations. It waited for Titus to finish the upper stories and inaugurate the games. It waited for Domitian to dig the hypogeum and install the machinery. It waited through the fire of 217 and the earthquake of 847. It waited through the looting and the quarrying and the consecration. It waited through the Renaissance and the Reformation and the Enlightenment. It waited for you, and now it will wait for the next pilgrim, the next tourist, the next seeker after truth. It will wait. It has nothing else to do. You've reached the end. 20,000 words. More than 20,000 words. A small book, a long essay, an endless monologue. And still you do not know the Colosseum. No one does. The Colosseum is not a thing to be known. It is a thing to be experienced. You have experienced it now. You have walked its passages and touched its stone and heard its echoes. You have read its inscriptions and studied its scars and imagined its dead. You have done what the Romans did. You have come to the Colosseum and looked upon the face of power. And now you will leave. But the Colosseum will remain, and it will remember you. Quam deus stat Colosseus, stat et Roma. As long as the Colossus stands, so shall Rome. The Colossus is still standing, and so are you. The morning light is different here. You noticed it when you arrived, but you did not name it. Now, standing again at the entrance, watching the shadows retreat across the travertine, you understand. This is not the light of entertainment. This is the light of ceremony. The Romans did not come here for fun. Fun is casual. Fun is optional. Fun is what you do when you have nothing better to do. This was not optional. To miss the games was to mark yourself as outside the community. To miss the games was to reject the emperor. To miss the games was to declare that you did not belong to Rome. So you came. Not because you wanted to, because you had to. Look at the seating again, not as architecture, as sociology. The first row, the podium, was reserved for senators. They sat on marble chairs, each inscribed with the name of its occupant. A senator did not simply attend the games. He occupied his designated space, visible to the entire crowd, his status confirmed and reconfirmed with every glance. Above the senators sat the equestrians, the businessmen, the tax farmers, the provincial administrators. They did not have individual chairs, but their section was clearly demarcated, separated from the lower orders by a low wall and a corridor of empty space. Above them sat the citizens, Roman citizens, male, adult, enrolled in one of 35 tribes. They sat by tribe, as they did in the voting assemblies. The Colosseum was not just an amphitheatre. It was the Comitia Centuriata, meeting under the open sky. Above them sat the women, the foreigners, the slaves, and at the very top, in the wooden gallery that no longer exists, sat the poorest of the poor, the ones who had no tribe, no vote, no status. The ones who came not because they were invited, but because they were permitted. The building was a map of Roman society, and like all maps, it simplified. You have heard that the Colosseum held 50,000 people. 50,000 is an abstraction. 50,000 is a number. 50,000 is a statistic. 50,000 is also the population of a small city. Imagine 50,000 people arriving at the same building, at the same time, and being seated in less than 15 minutes. Imagine the logistics. Imagine the crowd control. Imagine the coordination required to move 50,000 human beings through 76 entrances, up hundreds of staircases, into thousands of individual seats. This was not accident. This was military planning. The men who designed the Colosseum were not architects. They were engineers. They had built bridges and aqueducts and fortifications. They understood mass and movement and flow. They understood that a crowd is not a collection of individuals, but a single entity, a fluid, a force of nature. They built channels to direct that force. The entrances were valves. The staircases were conduits. The corridors were baffles. The seating was a reservoir. 50,000 people, flowing like water. And at the center of it all, the Emperor, the dam. You are walking the perimeter. The building is an ellipse, not a circle, not an oval, but a true ellipse, mathematically precise, geometrically perfect. The architects chose this shape for a reason. A circle centers the viewer on the performer. A circle says, look here, look at this. This is the focus of your attention. An ellipse does something else. An ellipse has two foci. One focus was the arena floor, the place of death, the place where the gladiators fought and the animals died and the condemned were executed. The other focus was the imperial box. The emperor did not watch the games from the side. He watched from the end, positioned so that the entire arena was visible before him, a stage stretching to the horizon of the opposite wall. He was not a spectator. He was a participant. His presence was part of the spectacle. When you looked at the arena, you saw death. When you looked at the emperor, you saw the man who controlled death. And when you looked at the crowd, you saw yourself, reflected in 50,000 faces. The ellipse is a machine for producing meaning. It is still producing it. You have heard about the opening procession, Pompa. Before the games began, before the first animal was released or the first gladiator entered the arena, there was a parade. Musicians, trumpeters, standard bearers, priests carrying statues of the gods, attendants bearing incense and offerings, and the gladiators. They marched in formation, their armor polished, their weapons sheathed. They did not look like men condemned to die. They looked like soldiers, heroes, demigods. They raised their right hands and spoke the words, Ave Imperator, Morituri te salutam. Hail, Emperor. Those who are about to die salute you. It is almost certain that gladiators did not actually say this. The phrase appears only once in ancient literature, and it was spoken by condemned criminals, not professional fighters. But the myth persists, because the myth is more true than the fact. Those who are about to die salute you. The emperor received their salute, and then they died. Not all of them, not most of them, but enough. Enough to make the salute meaningful. Enough to remind everyone present that life is temporary, that death is certain, that the emperor stands between the living and the dead. The procession was not entertainment. It was theology. You are looking at the arena wall, 4 meters high, smooth marble, originally. No handholds, no footholds, no way for a wounded gladiator to climb to safety. The wall separated the audience from the action. It also separated the audience from the consequences. You could sit in the stands, eating your lunch, chatting with your neighbor, and watch a man bleed to death on the sand below. You could see his face. You could hear his screams. You could smell his blood, but you could not touch him. He was on the other side of the wall. The wall made his death abstract. It transformed a human being into a spectacle. It converted suffering into entertainment. The wall is still there. It has been rebuilt, repaired, restored. But it is still there, and we are still on the other side. You have heard about the gladiator schools, ludi. There were 4 in Rome, the largest run by the imperial household. Gladiators lived there, trained there, ate and slept and dreamed there. They were not free. They were property. But they were valuable property, worth more than the men who guarded them. A star gladiator could earn more in a single appearance than a common laborer earned in a year. He could be celebrated in graffiti, memorialized in pottery, adored by women of the highest rank. He could become rich, famous, beloved. He could also die. That was the bargain. The gladiator schools were not prisons. They were factories. They took raw human material, slaves, criminals, prisoners of war, and processed it into a finished product. The product was not the gladiator himself. The product was his death. A gladiator who never died was a failure. He might be skilled, famous, wealthy, but he had not fulfilled his purpose. The purpose of a gladiator is to die, not quickly, not easily, not without struggle, but eventually. You are standing in the Ludus Magnus, or rather, you are standing where the Ludus Magnus used to be. The ruins are across the street from the Colosseum, a few meters below the modern street level. You can see the outline of the training arena, the curved seating for spectators, the cells where the gladiators slept. The Ludus Magnus was connected to the Colosseum by an underground passage. Gladiators did not enter the arena through the main gates in broad daylight, with the crowd watching. They entered through the tunnel, unseen, unheard, rising up through hypergeum like ghosts. The tunnel is still there. You cannot walk through it. It is closed to visitors, too fragile, too dangerous. But you can imagine it, dark, narrow, low-ceilinged. A long walk, in full armor, with nothing but your own thoughts and the distant roar of the crowd. What did they think about? We do not know. They left no letters, no diaries, no memoirs. They left only their bones, buried in mass graves along the Via Tiburtina. But we know what they felt. Fear, not of death. Death was inevitable. Death was the purpose. Death was the product. Fear of failure. A gladiator who died badly, who ran, who begged, who soiled himself, dishonored himself, and his school, and his lanista. He was not remembered. His name was not scratched into pottery or painted on walls. He was forgotten. A gladiator who died well, who fought bravely, who accepted his fate, who offered his throat to his opponent's sword, became immortal. They did not choose whether to die. They chose only how. You are asking about the women. Everyone asks about the women. Yes, there were female gladiators. The ancient sources call them ludia, or gladiatresses. They were rare, exotic, scandalous. Juvenal mocks a woman of senatorial rank who abandoned her husband and children to train in the gladiatorial schools. Petronius describes a female gladiator fighting in a Greek-style spectacle, but they were not common. The Roman attitude toward female gladiators was complex. They were admired for their skill and courage, but despised for transgressing gender boundaries. They were both celebrated and condemned, visible and invisible. We have their names: Achillea, Amazon. We have their images. A relief from Halicarnassus shows two women fighting, armed with swords and shields, their names inscribed above their heads. They are not caricatures. They are not grotesques. They are athletes, captured at the moment of combat. We do not know if they survived. We do not know if they died well. We know only that they existed, and that the crowd watched them, and that the emperor accepted their salute. Those who are about to die. You are walking through the Hypogeum again. The second time is different. The first time you saw a labyrinth. The second time you see a factory. Every element of this underground complex was designed for efficiency. The cages are clustered near the elevators, minimizing the distance animals had to be moved. The corridors are wide enough for two handlers to pass with a loaded stretcher. The ramps are graded for easy ascent. This is not a dungeon. This is an assembly line. The input: wild animals, condemned criminals, professional gladiators. The output: death. And like any factory, it required maintenance. The elevators broke. The ropes frayed. The trapdoors jammed. There were workers down here, slaves and freedmen and condemned criminals, whose job was to keep the machine running. They worked in darkness. They worked in noise. They worked in constant danger. From the animals in the cages and the machinery overhead and the crowd above, whose pleasure was the only measure of success. They are not remembered. Their names are not inscribed on any monument. Their graves are not marked. Their deaths are not recorded. But they were here, and they kept the machine running. You have heard about the executions. Noon, the lunch break. The gladiators rested, the crowd ate, and the condemned entered the arena. They were not fighters. They were not athletes. They were criminals, prisoners of war, deserters, debtors, men and women who had been sentenced to death and sent to Rome for execution. The methods varied: damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to beasts. The condemned was tied to a stake or simply released into the arena, unarmed, and the animals were let loose. Lions, bears, leopards, sometimes wolves, boars, bulls, whatever was available. Crucifixion. The condemned was nailed to a cross and left to die. The cross was low, so the animals could reach him. Cremation. The condemned was burned alive in a tunica molesta, a flammable tunic soaked in pitch. Reenactment. The condemned was costumed as a mythological figure and killed in a dramatic recreation of his or her death. Orpheus torn apart by the Maenads. Hercules burning on Mount Waiter. Icarus falling from the sky. The crowd watched while they ate. They did not look away. Why would they? These were not people. These were criminals. Their deaths were not tragedies. They were justice. They were the visible manifestation of the law, the emperor's law, the law that kept Rome safe and orderly and civilized. The executions were not entertainment. They were pedagogy. You are looking at the wooden cross, not the real cross. The real cross is at the east end of the arena, installed in the 18th century. This is a different cross, a small one, carved into the wall of the Hypogeum. Who carved it? A slave? A freedman? A pilgrim? We do not know. The carving is crude, shallow, amateur. It was made by someone with a simple tool and limited skill, but it was made, and it has survived, while the names of emperors and generals and senators have been erased. The cross is a palimpsest. It overwrites the original meaning of this space. It transforms a place of imperial violence into a place of Christian suffering. It replaces the emperor with Christ, the gladiator with the martyr, the execution with the sacrifice. But the original meaning is still there, beneath the cross, beneath the plaster, beneath the centuries. The Hypogeum remembers what it was, a death factory, and no amount of consecration can change that. You have heard about the restoration of Theodoric. The 6th century. The Roman Empire in the west had fallen. The last emperor had been deposed, and a Gothic king ruled Italy from Ravenna. But Theodoric was a civilized man. He had been educated in Constantinople. He respected Roman traditions. He paid for the Colosseum to be repaired. Not because he loved games. The games had stopped long before his reign. The last recorded venatio in the Colosseum was in 523, and it was probably a small affair. A few animals, a handful of hunters. Theodoric repaired the Colosseum because it was a symbol. A symbol of what? Rome, empire, civilization. The things the Goths were supposed to preserve, not destroy. He did not preserve it. He delayed its decay by a few decades, maybe a century. But the decay was inevitable. The aqueducts had been cut. The Hypogeum could not be flooded. The economy had collapsed. No one could afford to import animals from Africa. The population had shrunk. There were not enough people to fill the seats. The Colosseum became a ghost, and then a quarry, and then a fortress, and then a shrine, and then a tourist attraction. Theodoric could not save it. No one could. You're walking along the Via dei Fori Imperiali, the road Mussolini built, straight and wide and empty, cutting through the heart of ancient Rome. He tore down medieval houses to build it. He paved over imperial forums. He created a parade route for his fascist legions. He did not tear down the Colosseum. He restored it. In the 1930s, Mussolini ordered the Colosseum to be cleaned and repaired. The accumulated debris of centuries was removed. The surviving portions of the facade were reinforced. The Hypogeum was excavated for the first time since antiquity. Why? Because Mussolini saw himself as a new Augustus. Because he dreamed of a Roman Empire reborn. Because he believed that the Colosseum was not just a monument to the past, but a model for the future. He was wrong. The Colosseum is not a model. It is a warning. But fascists do not read warnings. They read manifestos. They read propaganda. They read their own desires projected onto the past. Mussolini saw the Colosseum and thought, power. He did not see the deaths. He did not see the forgetting. He did not see that the empire he admired had destroyed itself from within, hollowed out by its own violence. Unable to imagine any future beyond the endless repetition of spectacle, he saw only the stone, and the stone endured. You are asking about the earthquakes. 5 major earthquakes in the past 2,000 years. 847, 1,231, 1,349, 1,703, 2016. Each one damaged the building. Each one required repair. The earthquake of 1349 was the worst. It collapsed the entire south side of the outer wall. Not a crack, not a lean, a collapse. Hundreds of tons of travertine fell into a heap at the base of the building. Why was the south side more vulnerable than the north? Geology. The Colosseum is built on a former lake bed. The ground is not uniform. The north side sits on firmer soil than the south. When the earthquake came, the south side shook more violently, and the wall fell. But the collapse was also structural. The builders of the Colosseum had used iron clamps to hold the travertine blocks together. By 1349, those clamps had been pried out and melted down. The blocks were held only by gravity and friction. Gravity and friction were not enough. The south wall fell, and the Colosseum became what it is today. A fragment, a ruin, a broken circle. But fragments can be beautiful. Ruins can be meaningful. Broken things can be loved. You are standing at the broken end. The south wall is gone. Where once there were 4 stories of arches and engaged columns, there is now open air. You can see the interior of the building, the hypogeum, the arena floor, the seating tiers. You can see the medieval houses that once clung to the outer wall, their outlines still visible in the surviving masonry. You can see the sky. The broken end is the most photographed part of the Colosseum. It is the iconic view, the ruined arch against the blue Italian sky, the symbol of Rome's grandeur and decay. But the broken end is not just aesthetic, it is structural. The Colosseum is no longer a complete building. It is a fragment. The forces that once flowed continuously around the ellipse now concentrate at the broken ends, pushing outward, threatening further collapse. The engineers have installed steel ties to hold the building together. They have injected grout into the foundations. They have braced the surviving walls with invisible supports. The Colosseum is stable, but it is not whole, and it never will be again. You have heard about the gardens. For centuries, the Colosseum was a garden, not a formal garden with manicured hedges and ornamental fountains, a wild garden. Plants growing out of the cracks in the masonry, seeds carried by wind and birds, taking root in the accumulated debris of centuries. Botanists catalogued them in the 19th century. Over 400 species, native to Italy, yes, but also to Greece, to Asia Minor, to North Africa. Plants whose ancestors had arrived in the Colosseum as packing material for imported animals, or as seeds in the fodder of elephants and camels, or as offerings left by pilgrims and tourists. The Colosseum was a botanical garden, not by design, by accident. The plants thrived in the ruins. They found shelter in the cracks and crevices, water in the rain and condensation, soil in the dust of pulverized marble. They grew, and then they were removed. In the 1870s, after Rome became the capital of a unified Italy, the Colosseum was excavated and restored. The debris was cleared, the plants were uprooted. The wild garden was replaced with orderly gravel paths and interpretive signage. The botanists protested, but the archaeologists won. The Colosseum is not a garden. It is a monument. You are looking at the graffiti, not ancient graffiti, medieval graffiti, Renaissance graffiti, modern graffiti, names, dates, prayers, curses, love declarations, political slogans. Someone carved, remember me. Someone carved, I was here. Someone carved, forgive me. The graffiti is everywhere if you look for it. Scratched into the travertine, incised into the plaster, carved into the brick. Thousands of individual marks, each one the trace of a human being who stood exactly where you are standing now. Who were they? We do not know. Most of them did not leave their names. Or they left names that mean nothing to us. Giovanni, Maria, Giuseppe. Names so common they are invisible. But they were here, and they wanted to leave a mark that said, I existed. I passed through this place. I was alive once. The Colosseum is covered in marks. It is a palimpsest of human presence, and every mark is a prayer against oblivion. You have heard about the conservation debate. What should we preserve? How should we preserve it? Who should decide? The traditionalists argue for minimal intervention. Clean the stone, stabilize the structure, remove nothing. Let the Colosseum be what it has become, a ruin, beautiful in its decay. The interventionists argue for restoration, rebuild the missing sections, reconstruct the arena floor, install modern amenities, make the Colosseum what it once was, a functioning building, accessible and understandable. Both positions have merit. Both positions are wrong. The Colosseum is not a problem to be solved. It is not a question to be answered. It is not a text to be interpreted. It is a presence. It exists. It endures. It will continue to exist and endure long after the traditionalists and interventionists and conservationists are dead and forgotten. The Colosseum does not need our help. It needs our attention, our silence, our humility. You are walking through the upper levels. The stairs are steep. The passages are narrow. The stone is worn smooth by 2,000 years of feet. At the top, the view opens out. You can see the Roman Forum, the Palatine Hill, the Vittoriana. You can see the dome of St. Peter's, the pine trees of the Villa Borghese, the brown ribbon of the Tiber. You can see the modern city, sprawling outward in every direction, covering the ancient landscape with concrete and asphalt and glass. You can see how small the Colosseum is. Not physically. Physically, it is enormous. But in the context of the modern city, it is just one building among millions. It is surrounded by traffic and tourists and souvenir vendors. It is contained, confined, domesticated. Once this building dominated the skyline. Now it is dominated by the skyline. Once this building was the center of the world. Now it is a stop on the metro line. Once this building was eternal. Now it is old. There is a difference. You have heard about the night shows. In the 1930s, Mussolini held torchlight spectacles in the Colosseum. Thousands of participants, choreographed formations, dramatic lighting. The building became a stage for fascist propaganda. In the 2000s, a luxury goods company sponsored a series of concerts. Pop stars performed on a temporary stage erected in the arena. The audience sat on folding chairs, sipping champagne, watching the show. Both events were controversial. Both events were popular. Both events used the Colosseum as a backdrop, a prop, a symbol. But the Colosseum is not a symbol. It is a building. Buildings have functions. The function of the Colosseum was violence. It was designed for violence, built for violence, operated for violence. For 400 years, its only purpose was the production of death. That function is obsolete, but the building remains, and we do not know what to do with it. We cannot return it to its original function. We do not want to. We cannot let it stand empty and silent. We do not know how. So we fill it with music. We fill it with fashion shows and corporate events and celebrity appearances. We fill it with ourselves, and we pretend that is enough. You are asking about the animals, not the ones that died in the arena, the ones that survived. What happened to the elephants that were not killed, the lions that were not released, the bears that were not mauled? They were probably killed anyway. Animals were expensive to feed and difficult to house. A beast that survived one show might be saved for another, but eventually it would die, either in the arena or in the cage. Some were given away. The emperor might present a surviving animal to a friend or ally as a gift. A lion, a leopard, an elephant. A living trophy, proof of the giver's power and the receiver's status. Some were retired. Old gladiators were sometimes given land and a pension. Old animals were sometimes released into private menageries or imperial game parks. Most were simply disposed of. Their bodies were butchered and distributed as meat. Their skins were tanned and sold as leather. Their bones were boiled and carved into tools and trinkets. Nothing was wasted. The Colosseum was a machine for processing death, and death, processed efficiently, produces byproducts. You are standing in the Tiergarten, not the Berlin Zoo. The Tiergarten was the name medieval Romans gave to the Colosseum when it was used as a game preserve. The popes stocked it with deer and wild boar and hunted them for sport. The building that had once been the site of mass slaughter became a hunting ground for the papal court. This is not irony. This is reuse. Every society reuses the monuments of its predecessors. The Greeks reused Mycenaean tombs as shrines. The Romans reused Etruscan temples as foundations. The Christians reused Roman basilicas as churches. We reuse the Colosseum as a tourist attraction. In 2,000 years, archaeologists will excavate our hotels and restaurants and gift shops. They will wonder what we believed. They will reconstruct our rituals. They will give us names we never claimed and purposes we never intended. And they will be wrong. But their wrongness will become truth, because the past does not exist. Only the present exists, and the present is always wrong. You have heard about the ghosts. Every ancient building has ghosts. The Colosseum has more than most. Pilgrims in the Middle Ages reported seeing phantom gladiators fighting in the moonlight. Tourists in the 19th century claimed to hear the roar of phantom lions. Psychics in the 20th century detected residual energy from centuries of violence. The ghosts are not real, but the longing for ghosts is real. We want the dead to speak. We want the past to be present. We want the Colosseum to be haunted. Because if it is haunted, it is not empty. If it is haunted, the dead are not entirely dead. If it is haunted, something of what happened here still survives. The ghosts do not exist, but the longing exists. And the longing is its own kind of haunting. You are looking at the iron ties. They are everywhere. Long metal rods inserted into the masonry, connecting one side of a wall to the other. They hold the building together, preventing the surviving sections from collapsing outward. The iron ties are not ancient. They were installed in the 19th century when the Colosseum was in danger of complete collapse. They are functional, not decorative. They are ugly. They are visible. They are also necessary. The Colosseum cannot stand without them. This is true of all ancient buildings. They require constant maintenance, constant intervention, constant support. Without us, they would crumble into rubble. Without us, they would return to the earth from which they came. The Colosseum is not independent. It is dependent. It needs us as much as we need it. And that dependence is a kind of relationship. A relationship of care, of obligation, of mutual survival. We keep the Colosseum standing. The Colosseum keeps us remembering. You have heard about the geology. The Colosseum is built on a lake bed, Nero's lake, the Stagnum Neronis, drained by Vespasian and filled with earth and rubble. The ground beneath the Colosseum is not solid rock. It is alluvium, silt, clay. It compresses under weight. It shifts with changes in water pressure. The Colosseum is sinking, not quickly, not dramatically, but slowly, steadily, inevitably. The north side is sinking faster than the south side. The building is tilting, imperceptibly, a few millimeters per century. Eventually, it will collapse. Not tomorrow, not next year, not even next century, but eventually. The engineers can slow the process. They can inject grout into the foundations, install drains to control groundwater, monitor the tilt with laser sensors. They can buy time. They cannot stop it. The Colosseum is built on a lake, and lakes reclaim their own. You are walking through the underground passage, not the gladiator's tunnel. A different passage, narrower, darker. It connects the Hypogeum to the Ludus Magnus, the great gladiatorial school that once stood across the street. The passage is closed to visitors, but you can see the entrance, a low arch in the brick wall, blocked by a modern gate. Beyond the gate, darkness. What is down there? Nothing. Empty space, dust and debris, and the accumulated silence of centuries, but also everything. The passage is a threshold. It marks the boundary between two worlds, the world of the living and the world of the dying. The gladiators crossed this threshold every time they entered the arena. They went in as men and came out as corpses, or survivors, or something in between. The threshold is still there. The boundary is still there. And every time you look at that dark arch, you are standing on the side of the living, looking toward the side of the dying. You are on the wrong side of the threshold. You have always been on the wrong side. You have heard about the fires. Each fire damaged the Colosseum. Each fire required repair. Each fire destroyed something that could never be rebuilt. The fire of 217 was the worst. Lightning struck the upper gallery, and the wooden seats burned for days. The velarium collapsed. The marble cladding cracked and spalled. The bronze decorations melted and ran down the walls in rivulets. They rebuilt it. They always rebuilt it. But each rebuilding was different. Each rebuilding replaced the original with something newer, cheaper, less durable. Each rebuilding erased a little more of the original fabric. The Colosseum we see today is not the Colosseum Vespasian built. It is not the Colosseum Titus inaugurated. It is not the Colosseum Domitian renovated. It is the Colosseum of 1,000 rebuildings, 1,000 repairs, 1,000 compromises. It is the Colosseum of survival, and survival always requires sacrifice. You are looking at the travertine, not the clean, golden stone of the restored sections. The other stone, the weathered, pitted, blackened stone that has been exposed to the elements for 2,000 years. Look closely. Do you see the tool marks? The parallel grooves where Roman masons chiseled the surface smooth? The drill holes where medieval scavengers pried out the iron clamps? The graffiti, the scars, the patina of age? This stone is not inert. It is alive. It breathes. It expands and contracts with changes in temperature and humidity. It absorbs water and releases it. It hosts colonies of lichen and moss and bacteria. It erodes, grain by grain, particle by particle, returning to the sand from which it was formed. The stone is dying, very slowly, very gracefully, but dying. And we, who love this building, are watching it die. We can slow the process. We can clean the stone, consolidate the surface, apply protective coatings. We can buy time. We cannot stop it. Nothing lasts forever, not even Rome. You have heard about the Vandals, not the historical Vandals, who sacked Rome in 455 and took the gilded bronze tiles from the roof of the Temple of Jupiter, Optimus Maximus. the metaphorical vandals, the tourists who carve their names into the travertine, the souvenir hunters who chip off fragments of marble, the graffiti artists who spray paint the ancient walls. We condemn them. We call them barbarians. We call them vandals. We call them criminals. But we are no different. We consume the Colosseum with our cameras and our commentary and our casual indifference. We use it as a backdrop for selfies and a setting for Instagram stories and a subject for Facebook posts. We reduce it to pixels and data and ephemeral digital impressions. We are eating it, slowly, silently, with the best intentions. We are the vandals now. We have always been the vandals. You are standing at the foot of the cross. Not the 18th century cross, the Stations of the Passion, the official shrine. A different cross. A small cross, carved into the wall of the Hypogeum by an anonymous hand. You found it yourself. No guide pointed it out. No plaque explains it. No tourist photographs it. It is invisible, except to those who are looking. You were looking. Why? Because you wanted to find something the guidebooks did not mention, something the archaeologists had not catalogued, something that belonged only to you. You found it. A cross, crude and shallow and amateur, carved by someone with a simple tool and limited skill, but also with faith. What did that faith mean? We do not know. Was it a prayer, a memorial, a declaration? Was it carved by a slave, a pilgrim, a prisoner? Was it carved in hope, or despair, or simple boredom? We do not know. We only know it is there, and you found it. You have heard about the millennium. In the year 1000, Christian Europe expected the end of the world. Christ would return. The dead would rise. The saved would be separated from the damned. The old order would pass away, and all things would be made new. The Colosseum still stood. It had stood for nearly 1,000 years. It would stand for another 1,000. The end of the world did not come. Or perhaps it came, and no one noticed. Perhaps the world ended many times, in many ways, for many people. Perhaps the Colosseum witnessed the end of the Roman world, the end of the imperial world, the end of the medieval world. Perhaps it will witness the end of our world too. And then it will stand, alone, in the silence, waiting. For what? For another world to begin. You are looking at the arches, 76 on the ground floor, originally. Each one a perfect semicircle, springing from travertine piers. Now many are blocked. Some are walled up with medieval brick. Some are filled with modern gates and turnstiles. Some are simply empty. Their original function forgotten. Their purpose lost. But the arches remain. They are the essence of the building. Not the stone, not the concrete, not the marble. The arches. The arch is a Roman invention. Not the true arch, that existed long before Rome, but the systematic use of the arch, the integration of the arch into large-scale architecture, the transformation of the arch from a structural element into a symbolic form. The arch says, we can defy gravity. The arch says, we can span great distances with minimal material. The arch says, we can build things that will last forever. The arch lied, but it lied so beautifully that we forgave it. You have heard about the pozzolana, volcanic ash, mined from deposits around Pozzuoli, near Naples, mixed with lime and water to form Roman concrete. The concrete of the Colosseum is 2,000 years old. It is still hard. It is still strong. It is still doing its job, holding up the vaults and corridors and staircases that millions of tourists walk on every year. Modern concrete lasts about 50 years. Roman concrete lasts millennia. We do not know why. We have analyzed the Hua Shui Chengfen. We have replicated the mixing ratios. We have studied the curing processes. We can't reproduce the result. Roman concrete is a lost art. The Romans did not intend to lose it. They did not hoard their knowledge or hide it in secret archives. They wrote about it. Vitruvius devoted an entire book of De Architectura to concrete and masonry. Pliny discussed it in his Natural History. But the knowledge died anyway. The empire died. The cities shrank. The demand for monumental construction vanished. The workshops closed. The techniques were forgotten. We reinvented concrete in the 19th century. It is not the same. It will never be the same. You are walking along the exterior wall. The travertine is warm beneath your hand. The sun has been on it all morning, and the stone has absorbed the heat, storing it against the cool of the coming evening. You touch the pockmarks where the clamps used to be. You touch the scars where the marble was pried away. You touch the graffiti, the names and dates and prayers carved into the surface by centuries of visitors. You are touching the Colosseum, and the Colosseum is touching you. This is not metaphor. This is physics. The atoms of your skin are interacting with the atoms of the stone. Electrons are repelling electrons. Energy is being exchanged. You are connected. However briefly, however superficially, you are part of the building, and the building is part of you. You have heard about the restoration of 2016. The Hypogeum project, $30 million. 2 years of work. New walkways, new lighting, new interpretive signage. The project was controversial. Critics said the money should have been spent elsewhere. On schools, hospitals, infrastructure. On the living, not the dead. Supporters said the Colosseum is a cultural asset, an economic engine, a symbol of Italian identity. It generates revenue. It creates jobs. It attracts tourists from around the world. Both arguments are valid. Neither argument addresses the real question. Why do we care about this building? Why do we spend millions of euros to preserve a ruin? Why do we travel thousands of miles to look at broken stone? Why do we devote our lives to studying a building that was designed to kill?